So I had to go through Winston-Salem on the way to Portland, Oregon. And I thought on the flight on the way down, I wonder if Mom could add something to my speech. I thought, I wonder what the single biggest change is she would say had occurred since she was little in 1925 in Eastern Tennessee, where she was born and raised. And I thought maybe she'll say television, maybe she'll say air travel, maybe she'll say long-distance phone calls. And when I got home, I asked my mom, I said, hey, Mom, I'm working on this speech. Can you tell me what's the single biggest change from when you were a little girl? And she said, oh, that'd be real easy. That would be indoor plumbing. And like you, I laughed, and my mother said, I don't know what you think is funny. We didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity till I was 16 years old. There's no pictures from my mother's childhood because they were too poor to afford them. But this is her uncle and her cousins. And this is where they lived, next door to where my mother lived. That was the world my mother had grown up in. A few years later, my mother had to quit working. Now, you're probably surprised to hear that a 74-year-old lady who at that point had terminal lung cancer still had a job, but I'm betting you didn't have to memorize 25 Bible verses and not either. So you may not know the story of the widow's mite, which is a story where a poor widow goes into a synagogue. She puts a single coin in the collection plate. And Jesus turns to the congregation and says, the widow has given all that she has. She has made the greatest gift. My mother had this philosophy, you give to help other people. So even though she couldn't work, she still wanted to help. So one day she called me up, she said, Kevin, I'm going to volunteer at a place called Holly Haven. Now, I don't know what you picture when you picture Holly Haven. I thought plant nursery. So, my mother loved to grow things, you know. And I said, so what do they grow at the Holly Haven, Mom? That sounds like a nice place. She says, grow, Kevin, I don't know what you mean. Holly Haven is an AIDS hospice. It is the first one we've had in Winston-Salem, and I am their first volunteer. So, I started hearing all these stories about Holly Haven on the phone. And so when I came home with Thanksgiving, I wasn't surprised with Mom. I didn't even have the bag out of the car. Mom said, let's go over to Holly Haven. So I got back in the car. I drive to Holly Haven. I get there. And I pictured this gigantic building. And it was a house. It was a house that had been converted into a hospice, 5 bedrooms. I came in to the first room, and the man who was lying in there was in such bad shape, open lesions on his face, lots of needles and tubes. I kind of stepped back, and my mother just hugged him. I thought, wow. And then they all started figuring out who I was. You're Miss Jennings, boy? Well, we love your mama. We just love your mama. Which I thought was very nice until I learned they all love my mama for the wrong reason. Thanks to her lung problems, my mother had been put on oxygen shortly before this, and despite the fact that she was on oxygen, she continued to chain smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day. She would take the oxygen out, take a hit, take the oxygen out, take a hit. My partner, whose name is ironically Jeff Davis, and if you don't get that, ask a U.S. history teacher, said once, Alice, I don't have to worry about you dying of cancer because someday you will just blow your ass up with those cigarettes. So I probably shouldn't say, I'm sorry. So when I get to Holly Haven, there's all this oxygen. The guys aren't supposed to be smoking in a Holly Haven. They all love my mama because my mama is sneaking them out to the parking lot and smoking cigarettes in her car with them. And I said, Mom, you're finally the high school girl you never were, smoking cigarettes in the parking lot with the boys. And I got to the end of my tour, and I noticed that in the many, many conversations that we had had about Holly Haven, my mother had never once mentioned the fact that she had been taught was the most important fact about every patient at Holly Haven. The fact that every single one of them was black. My mother, raised in segregation, had somehow never mentioned this fact. And I thought maybe she had to memorize a few verses too, and maybe one of them was, love thy neighbor as thyself. In honor of my mother smoking, when she couldn't get them out to the car, she would just smoke on the porch. So my partner and I had the porch of the hospice named after her. And here she is standing in front on the Alice Jennings Memorial Smoking Porch. There are days when you're doing this work when you think things are never going to change. There are days when you think progress is just never going to happen. There are days when people will tell you, you just can't change the world. And if you forget every single thing I say tonight, I want you to remember the next part. The people who tell you you cannot change the world are lying to you. In 2001, I got my mother on the phone. She was very quiet. She's the pre-Oprah generation. They don't talk about their feelings. So I knew I'd have to pry it out of her. I said, Mom, what's wrong? She said, well, Andre died this morning. I hadn't met Andre because he'd only been in Holly Haven for a few weeks. He was a gay African-American man whose family had disowned them because of their own reading of the Bible. He was like 55 million Americans lacking health insurance, so he had received no health care. So that by the time he was admitted, he developed some kind of cancer or something in his throat so that he lost his power to speak. He lost his power to swallow. He had not eaten in quite some time. My mother told me he was 6'1" and weighed 110 pounds. He'd signed a living will saying, don't try to keep me alive. Somehow my mother and he developed this bond. So the previous day they'd asked my mother, Alice, would you take Andre over to Baptist Hospital? And she agreed, and she drove him to Baptist Hospital, and she took him in for treatment, and she began to realize that they were going to feed him intravenously. Andre couldn't speak. He was just shaking his head no. And the doctor finally said, what's wrong with this guy? And my mother said, well, he doesn't want you to do this. You should stop. And the doctor looked at my mother and looked at the African-American man and said, who are you, lady? You're clearly not his family. Well, don't talk like that to my mama. Because she said, you're right, I am not his family, but if you don't know how to do the right thing, I sure do. And my mother, my 5'1", 103 pounds, 76-year-old mother, lifted Andre out of the gurney by herself, put him in the wheelchair, took him back to her Toyota Corolla, drove him back to Holly Haven, and held his hand for 18 hours until he died. On those days when people tell you things cannot change, on those days when people tell you that one person cannot make a difference, on those days when people tell you that we cannot change the world, I want you to keep that image in mind of the straight, white, Southern Baptist great-grandmother holding the hand of the gay African-American man as he passes from this world to the next. And I want you to remember that the people who tell you you do not have the power to change the world are lying to you. You do have the power to change the world, and you need to use it. As the artist Andy Warhol once said, people will tell you that time changes things, but actually you have to change them yourself. Things are different on my second speech in Utah, not because 12 years have passed. Things are different because of people like Mike Thompson. Things are different because of Senator McCoy. Things are different because of Mayor Becker. Things are different because of Kelly Peterson and the East High School Gay Straight Alliance. But most of all, things are different because of you. Because you have found your power. You have told your truth. And hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month for the past 12 years, you have been setting Utah free. And that's what the power of one does. That's what the power of truth does. No one can take that from you. So when you leave tonight, keep this in mind. It is your power that has made things change. You have not waited for time to do it. You have changed them yourself. And in doing that, you have made history, a history you can be very proud to tell young people about. But we're hardly done. So when we leave tonight, go out there and use your power and make more history.